In the summer of 1699, on a small island off the eastern tip of Long Island, a man buried a chest. Inside it, by the inventory taken weeks later, were 1,111 ounces of gold, 2,549 ounces of silver, and a bag of emeralds. The man was Captain William Kidd. Within weeks, the chest had been dug up by the governor of New York, shipped to England, and entered into evidence at Kidd's trial for piracy. He was hanged in 1701. This is the only pirate burial of treasure that history can verify. One event, in roughly 80 years of the golden age of piracy, involving thousands of men and millions in stolen goods. Every other buried chest, every treasure map, every X on a beach comes from a novel. The interesting question is not whether pirates buried treasure. It is why they so obviously did not. Because the answer is not carelessness, and it is not bad planning. Run the numbers on a pirate's balance sheet, and burying wealth turns out to be the single worst thing he could do with it. What follows is the financial case against the most famous image in piracy, and the accounting of the industry that image created. Start with the product, because the myth misprices it immediately. The popular image of a pirate haul is a chest of gold coin. The reality, on most captures, was cargo. Prize manifests of the period are lists of tobacco, sugar, cloth, timber, provisions, livestock, ships' stores, and navigational charts. These were the goods that moved on merchant routes, and merchant ships were the target. A pirate who took a vessel usually acquired several tons of commodity inventory and a modest quantity of coin. Consider what burying that inventory would mean. Tobacco and sugar rot. Cloth rots faster. Livestock cannot be buried at all. Timber and ship stores are worth nothing without a buyer and a dock. The realizable value of a pirate's haul was locked inside goods that had to reach a market quickly or become worthless, which is why the industry's real bottleneck was never capture. It was distribution. A pirate needed a port, a fence, and a merchant willing to ask no questions. And he needed all three before his cargo spoiled. This is why the ports mattered so much. Port Royal, Nassau, Tortuga, these existed because stolen goods needed conversion, fast, into something that kept. And the thing that kept was coin. And coin, in that world, was for spending. So the first argument against buried treasure is simply that most treasure could not survive being buried. It was perishable working capital, and it behaved like inventory in any other business. It had to move. There is a second problem with the chest, which is the chest. Coin of this period was silver, and silver is heavy. A sum large enough to matter weighed enough to require several men to carry it, which means burying it was not a private act. It needed a boat, a landing, a digging party, and hours of daylight, all performed in front of witnesses who were themselves entitled to shares of what was going into the ground. The image of one man and one shovel and one secret is not merely unlikely. It describes a physical task that one man could not do. Now, the second obstacle, which is legal rather than physical. A pirate crew was not a gang with a leader who kept the money. It was a company operating under a written agreement. Before a voyage, the men signed articles that specified how plunder would be divided. So many shares to the captain, so many to the quartermaster and specialists, one full share to each ordinary hand. Those articles were the constitution of the ship, and the crew enforced them ruthlessly, because the share system was the only reason anyone had signed on. Under that system, plunder was held in the quartermaster's custody and divided among the crew as soon as practical after a capture. The distribution was public and it was counted, which means that at no point did a captain hold a heap of unallocated wealth that he could quietly take ashore and bury. The wealth was not his. It belonged, share by share, to men who had signed for it and who were standing on the deck watching the count. A captain caught diverting the common fund faced the harshest thing his crew could do, which was to vote him out of his job, or worse. So consider what a buried treasure actually implies. It implies one man holding wealth that, under the ship's own contract, had already been divided among 100 others. The famous image requires a violation of the one rule pirate crews were most willing to kill over. That is the second argument. The money was never in one pile long enough for anyone to bury it. The articles went further than that, and the detail is worth stating because it shows how seriously these crews took the accounting. Many sets of articles included a schedule of compensation for injury, with fixed sums for the loss of a right arm, a left arm, a leg, an eye. Those payments came off the top of the plunder, before the shares were calculated. A crew that had written down the price of a lost hand was not a crew that would tolerate an unexplained gap in the count. Every capture ended in an audit conducted by armed shareholders. Now, suppose a pirate did receive his share in coin and did stand alone on a beach with a shovel. Look at the decision from his side of the ledger. The average pirate career of this period is estimated at about 2 years, ended by disease, by battle, or by execution. That number is the foundation of every financial choice these men made. Saving assumes a future. His profession did not reliably supply one. Then, price the storage option itself. Buried coin earns nothing. It cannot be lent, invested, or spent. It requires him to survive, to return to a specific stretch of coastline, and to find an unmarked hole in a landscape that shifts with every storm. It offers no protection from the one risk that actually ended these careers, which was the rope, because a hanged man's cash simply stays in the ground. And it has no inheritance mechanism. There is no will, no executor, and no court that would enforce a claim on stolen goods. So a pirate who died with his wealth buried had not left it to anyone. He had thrown it away. Set that against the alternative, which was to spend it immediately in port. In Port Royal by 1680, there were more than 100 taverns for a town with roughly 1 for every 10 residents. Nassau ran the same model. The historical record shows pirates converting years of wages into a few weeks of consumption, and it is usually told as a story about vice. It is more accurate to call it a rational response to an actuarial table. Given a 2-year horizon, no legal title, no heirs, and no interest, spending is not recklessness. It is the correct answer. The buried chest is the one strategy that guarantees a total loss. Which brings the argument back to William Kidd, and to why his burial confirms the rule rather than breaking it. By 1699, Kidd was not operating a business. He was a hunted man attempting to negotiate. Accused of piracy, sailing home to argue that his commission had been legitimate, he needed something to trade. So he stopped at Gardiners Island and left a portion of his wealth in the ground, with the knowledge of the island's proprietor. The chest was not savings. It was collateral in a legal negotiation, and it was buried precisely because Kidd expected to bargain with it later. The negotiation failed at every stage. Kidd was arrested in July 1699. The governor of New York had the cash located and inventoried within weeks. The gold, the silver, the emeralds, along with reports of silver bars, rubies, and a diamond-set box. Contemporary accounts put the value at roughly £5,400. Every ounce of it was shipped to England, where it served as physical evidence against him. At his trial in 1701, Kidd offered to reveal where the rest was hidden in exchange for his life. The court was not interested. He was hanged at Execution Dock, his body left hanging over the Thames for years, and his buried treasure funded the prosecution that killed him. Now compare that to where real pirate wealth has actually been recovered. In 1717, the Whydah, commanded by Samuel Bellamy and carrying the accumulated proceeds of dozens of captured ships, went down in a storm off Cape Cod. Reports of the era describe more than 4 tons of gold, silver, and goods aboard. In 1984, a diver named Barry Clifford located the wreck beneath 30 feet of sand, and it became the first authenticated pirate treasure ever found. Roughly 200,000 artifacts have come up from the site, including some 20,000 coins. Note where that treasure was. Not in a hole. It was on the ship, in transit, still undivided, because the crew died before the share-out could happen. That is precisely what the economics predict. Pirate wealth existed in exactly 2 states, moving toward a market or already spent. The only reason the Whydah's cargo survived is that the men who owned it drowned before they could do either. The recovery also settles the question of what a real hoard looks like. The Whydah site has produced coins from many mints, gold worked in West African styles, weapons, tools, and the ordinary equipment of a working ship. It is not a chest of matched doubloons. It is the mixed, untidy inventory of a business that took whatever the last few ships happened to be carrying, which is exactly what the prize records describe and exactly what the myth leaves out.
So where did the buried chest come from?
It came from 3 books, and all 3 were built on Kidd. Washington Irving published Wolfert Weber in 1824, a story of men digging for Kidd's gold. Edgar Allan Poe published The Gold Bug in 1843, in which a coated parchment leads to a buried hoard hinted to be Kidd's. Robert Louis Stevenson published Treasure Island in 1883, and acknowledged in his preface that he had borrowed from Irving. Between them, these 3 works produced the map, the code, the marked spot, and the chest, and fixed them permanently in the popular image of piracy. The single failed transaction of a condemned man became, over 60 years of fiction, the defining activity of an entire profession. Then the fiction generated real expenditure. From 1795, treasure hunters have been excavating a shaft on Oak Island in Nova Scotia, convinced it holds a pirate hoard. The pit floods with seawater. The digging has continued, in one form or another, for more than 230 years. It has cost millions of dollars. It has killed 6 people. It has produced no confirmed treasure of any kind. The hunt now sustains a television series, which means the reliable revenue stream at Oak Island is not the treasure, but the search for it. The same pattern has repeated at Gardiners Island and along coastlines across the Atlantic world, where 3 centuries of digging have followed a legend that traces back to one chest, which was found, in a matter of weeks, by a government. So close the ledger on buried treasure. As a financial instrument, it offered no yield, no liquidity, no title, no inheritance, and no protection from the risk most likely to kill its owner, in an industry where the average career lasted an estimated 2 years. As a practice, it was blocked by the crew's own written contract, which divided every capture into counted shares before anyone reached shore. As a physical proposition, it was impossible for most of what pirates actually stole, because the majority of it rotted. Verified cases in the entire Golden Age: 1. Executed by a man trying to bargain for his life, who lost the treasure, the bargain, and the life. Verified cases of pirate treasure recovered from a shipwreck, in transit, exactly where the economics said it would be. Also 1. And it is the richest pirate find in history. The final entry belongs to the myth itself. 3 novelists took a failed plea bargain and turned it into the most recognizable image in the history of crime. And that image has now moved more money than the practice it describes ever did. Somewhere in the accounting, that qualifies as the most profitable pirate treasure ever buried. It was buried in a book.